right, so we are on the more volume practice. And volume is pretty simple. Volume is basically something that takes up three-dimensional space. Typically, you're going to show that with highlights or shadows. All right, so this is not exactly more volume, but it kind of is, right? And that, this is pretty flat. There's no highlights. There's, this might be an indicator of shadow, but it might also be an edge. This might be a highlight. It's hard to tell just by the style of the illustration. And then you got poof over here. Humidity, right? Something happened. That's what I've heard, at least. It doesn't work for me, unfortunately. No, it doesn't. It does not go poof. Might look like a troll if it did. So it's simply using highlights and shadows and what is called modeling, right? So as an object bends, usually the light is going to catch it across the surface where it bends, and then wherever there's the light can't strike, there will be shadow beyond that. Okay. And as we talked about yesterday, if I had a light source on this side, my highlights are going to be whatever is reflecting from this side, and then my shadow will fall on the other side, wherever that is. All right. So we're going to do a little bit of practice. We can practice building our shapes here. Basically, we're going to be using this as our model, and it may be a very short lesson today. We might get out early. All right. No objections. I didn't hear any objections. Okay. Illustrator, go ahead and open that up. All right. I'm going to create a new document. Doesn't really matter what my size is. I'm going to go ahead and use print and letter size and create. Let you get here. I can see the toolbar now. If I move it over here, can I still see it? Okay, today I can. I don't know. That's weird. Very strange. Okay, so we're going to create a cube shape. So I'm going to start off. Take the gradient off of there. Make sure my properties are showing here over in the layers. Take a cube shape here. Now, if I hold Shift while I create this, it will create a perfect square. Otherwise, I might be guessing here if I didn't hold Shift while I was creating this. So I'm going to hold Shift, and that is going to be my square. I'll go ahead and fill it with a color so it's a lot easier to see. Any color will do. I like this one better. And then I'm going to take the stroke off of it. Right there. Okay. You guys becoming more and more familiar with Illustrator tools, and I'm not leaving you guys behind, right? And you'll tell me if I am. Okay, excellent. Okay. So here we go. All right, so now, if you imagine that this was a cube, see, if I've got a box right here, maybe this will work. So those of you in Radioland, you're missing out on a fantastic visual here. Sorry. All right, so if you're looking straight on to this, you see a cube, more or less. Okay, so all of you have to pretend you're Amy sitting straight on right there. As I begin to turn this, right, what you're going to start seeing is this other side of the shape begin to emerge. This side is actually shortening from your viewpoint. Okay, so it's at its widest when you're looking at it straight on, but as I begin to turn it, if I turn it like that, now it's very narrow, right? So if I'm going to create anything that looks like a three-dimensional object with a square, as the shape turns, it actually becomes shorter. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and shorten this a little bit. This is going to be the side of my box here. All right, now I'm going to be also, maybe you can see this from your vantage point. As I move this up or down, it starts to lose its squareness. So if you look at the actual shape of this right here, the sides are skewed, right? That's how perspective works. It's odd that way. You no longer see it as a square. If you really look at it, you see it as a parallelogram or something close to it. So we'll go ahead and use our shear tool, if I can find it. There we go. So it's under the scale tool. I'm going to use the shear tool here. And maybe you can see that anchor. I'm going to go ahead and make this really big so you guys can see it better. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to use the shear tool, and in the center of this is my anchor, my point of origin. I'm going to grab that and drag it onto one edge or the other. Okay. So what that's going to do is it's going to anchor this side of the parallelogram as I grab this side and move it up. I'm going to hold shift while I do that to constrain it to 90 degrees. So that's beginning to look like the side of a box that is in three-dimensional space, faking out the eye. All right, so I'll need to make this a little bit smaller now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. All right, so I've hit Control-C. Now I'm going to make a copy right on top of it in front of it. So I'm going to use Control-F for front. All right, so Control-F for front. Now what I can do now is grab this edge and drag it over here to the right, and that way that edge right there is perfectly joined. And I don't have to do any manipulation to make sure those things are joined. All right. Now comes a time of maybe a little bit of fudging. Just a second. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and copy this now. And I want this edge to be joined, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my direct select tool. That's the white arrow tool. I'm going to click on this point at the bottom. What that does is it selects only that point. So you can see these other points are open points. That's what I want. Okay, this one is a filled in point, means I've got it selected. I'm going to hold shift and click this other bottom point. Means I've got those 2 points selected. Now I'm going to drag these up and match them up to that corner. Oh, I didn't make a copy of it. That would have been disastrous. Copy front. Control F. Okay, now I'm going to do my points here. Okay, so something like that gives us facsimile of a cube. All right. Did I lose anybody? Uh-huh. Nope. No. So I'll show that again. Copy front. I click. I hold shift. Click the other one. And then I release the shift button. And I release my mouse button. Okay, so those two things are selected. Now I click and drag those points up. Did I lose anybody? Travis? Kind of lost you. Okay. Where did I lose you? Okay. Got the, okay, you just want this one select. Oh, the 2 bottom points at the bottom? Okay. All right, so I'm going to copy, paste in front, and now I've clicked this one, shift clicked this one. I release all my mouse keys and buttons, right? Okay, take your hands off. All right. Now I'm going to click this one right here and drag it up and hit that corner point. Does that make sense? Now it should snap into place if Illustrator is working properly. All right. So this form, we're going to get into perspective really soon. This form of perspective, okay, wait for it, it's coming to me. I've forgotten the word to it. It's called isometric. It's called isometric, and this is how drafters work. They don't try and make everything look realistic. They try and make everything illustrative so that people can understand what they're building. Okay, so they use parallel lines rather than a one-point perspective. So this is our cube, and of course we can't differentiate which side is which because we don't have any differences in color. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of modeling here. I'm going to go ahead and make this just a touch smaller for the moment. Okay. All right, so we're going to need our gradient tool. I'm going to double click over here. It's about 2/3 of the way down. It's the gradient tool. Double click that. All right, you should get this. Bring it up here so you can see it better. Okay. Now using my selection tool, I can go pick one of these. Now I'm going to pretend like this face is facing the light. So this one is going to be much lighter than these other two, right? Because if it's reflecting more light, it's going to be lighter. Okay. I can go up here, and I'm going to change this to, I'm going to go ahead and change this to linear. What does that look like now? Where do you think the light looks like it's hitting that plane? What do you think? Sam, what do you think? Where do you think the light is hitting based upon what you see? Straight on. Yeah, it seems that way to me too. I kind of want to make it look like the light's coming from up in here. So I'm going to change the direction of my gradient tool. So I go back to my gradient tool in the toolbar, and you can see now I've got this controller. All right, this controls the direction and some aspects about my gradient. And I'm going to try some stuff. I'm going to click and drag this way, and it looks like I've gotten it. Okay, so that's not bad. Maybe I want to do this. Get the angle right. Something along those lines. Okay. Now, if I want this to go gray all the way to this upper edge, I can do a couple of different things. I could simply move my whole slider by clicking on that and dragging, or I could change it in my gradient panel. All right, so this is kind of fun. You can, with the flick of a wrist, if you double click on one of these, you can change the actual colors. So go ahead and try this now. Go ahead and make sure your gradient tool is selected. Click on this right here, and then come up into the gradient panel and double click one of these colors. You should get something that looks like that. You might have gotten something that looks a little bit different, but that's all right. There's different controls. Illustrator is really deep. There's lots and lots of tools to learn. Okay, so you see this palette right here. I could work with that palette. I could click down here. These are my swatches. Those are my common swatches that I normally use in my properties panel. I could use that also. All right, so let's say I wanted a light green. Is that the Amber Alert? I missed it this morning. So, huh? Oh, really? Wow. They really want you to pay attention, Juan. I don't think you can stop it, the Amber Alert. I'm pretty sure. Can you? Okay. Wow. Gotcha. Okay. So if I wanted this to be a light green, for instance, I click on my swatches here, and I'm going to choose that light green, and then I'm going to come over here and double-click this one where it's black and choose, let's say I'd choose a dark green. Ooh, that's ugly. I don't like it. I don't. If I want to change that, I could do it in my color panel or my color palette right here. Go to here, and now it's switched because what I'm using is a different color model than just black and white. Okay, so I can get in here and adjust these different sliders. This one right here is the slider for cyan, which is kind of a medium blue. This one is magenta. I don't need to say what magenta is, right? It's like super pink. Okay. Did I get that right, ladies? Because I'm a guy. I don't have that vocabulary for for colors. Yellow right here, and then black. Right? If I pulled all the black out, pushed all the cyan up, and then pulled the other colors out of here, it should turn that, kind of medium blue. I don't what else to call it. If I want to add magenta to it, it gets kind of purplish. All right. If I pulled cyan out, it becomes super pink or magenta. Pull it yellow. Okay. Did I lose anybody so far? Lost you? Say that last part again. Okay. 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 Gotcha. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and kind of mimic that green color. And what do you use to get green? What colors do you mix? Blue and yellow. So cyan is our closest blue, and yellow. Get closer and closer to it. That's not terrible bad, I think. All right. Then I'm going to add a little black to it so that it's kind of a natural color. All right. I might want to add just a little bit more blue to it because shadows tend to be on the bluer side if the color is warm, if the light is warm. Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh man. Berenstein Bears? I never knew that. Never knew that. All right. So if I want to, let's see here, if I want to keep this color to use in the future, I think, will it allow me to? I'm going to go to my swatches. That's what I'm going to do. All right, in my swatches, I've opened up my swatches panel. I want to keep this gradient. So I'm going to grab that and drag it down into my usable gradients from my swatches. All right, that means I can go over to here and apply that swatch, and it becomes that gradient, which is really nice. All right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. You can eyedropper the gradients. All right, so we good so far with this step? Travis, you good? Juan, Gavin? You've been lost. Help me help you. Okay, so
I got way too far behind and I tried doing it on my own.
Okay. So I'll try and catch you and Sam up after. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control, and then what that does is it switches me to my selection tool and click this one right here. Now, because my my light is coming from this direction and hitting, it's going to be lighted along the top and get darker as it goes. This one right here should be significantly darker, but it might be a little lighter towards this edge. Okay? So I'm gonna manipulate my gradient. So I'm using my swatches again. I've clicked on my gradient, and because I'm using the gradient tool, I can change that. By working with it, I'm clicking and dragging and trying to look for something that looks like it might actually be a good representation of light would work. Something along those lines. Then I'm going to do the same thing along the top. Now the top is probably going to be kind of a mirror image of this one, I would think. All right, so I'm going to click and drag back. Maybe something along those lines. What do you think? Do we come close, relatively, to making it look like a actual cube shape? So we have highlights and shadows. What we don't have is a shadow being cast off this object. All right. So what we don't want to do is grab this and do the effect stylized drop shadow. All right, because that'll look weird, especially because I've got shapes on top. Yeah, you could get the effect. You absolutely could get the effect of making it go all the way around, but I'm going to avoid that. And I'm going to pretend like my light source being up here, my shadow is going to be cast back off of this direction. So I'm going to use my pen tool and click on this point, and I'm going to kind of have to fake it, right? Because I can't actually see the object and how the interplay of lights and darks is actually working. So I'm going to fake it something like this. I'm going to send this to back using Control-Shift left bracket. That's a good one to remember. And I'm going to set my gradient on this one to be, okay, I'll do it this way, white and black. Okay, now I can see my direction is wrong. It's going from light to dark this direction. So I have to go back to my gradient tool and head it the correct direction. Something like that. Now that doesn't look right. I can already see. And the reason is because if the light were shining from up here, the shadow would actually start right here. So I'm going to move my point to here. That looks better. And you're going to adjust from there to whatever feels more real. Something along those lines. Let's see. So here we go. We've got this one. I've got a cast shadow. Now I've in this instance right here, the cast shadow is well beneath this, meaning this is floating in space. My example here is on a flat surface. You can do it either way. Works for me. All right, so what we're going to do is now I'm going to go ahead and grab a copy of this. I'm holding Alt. Once I start dragging it, that will make a copy of it. Show you that again. Select it. I'm starting to drag it. Now I'm holding Alt on the keyboard. We'll make an exact copy of it. Okay. So in this, I'm going to change my lighting. I'm going to pretend my lighting is coming from over here and cast a shadow off this direction and change my gradients to match. Okay. So here we go. I've got my shape selected. I'm using my gradient tool and something along these lines. I think I can leave this one alone. So that feels right to me. But I do want to change this top one so that it feels a little bit more realistic. Now, if the light were coming from directly above, we would have an exact copy of that top shape below it as the shadow, wouldn't we? It would make sense, right? Since the light is hitting directly that square shape, and it would be casting downward. But in this case, the light is coming from here, and so what's going to happen is it's going to cast off this direction, and it would probably get bigger. Okay, I've just sent it to back. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and use my gradient tool again. Set it to linear. I'm going to set my white and black values. And readjust. Whoops, went the wrong direction. That doesn't look terrible. Maybe I need to move the position of it to make it look more realistic. The other thing about distance is that it tends to fuzz things out. So if I wanted to make this a little bit more realistic, what I might do is go up to Effect, Blur, and then Gaussian blur is kind of the generic sort of blur. And I'm going to preview that and see the more you change the radius of it, the softer it gets, right? The higher that value gets, the softer it gets. So let's say I set that somewhere in there, and it creates a little bit more realistic shadow in that spot. All right. Okay, last shape I'm going to make is the ellipse. All right, so I'm going to click and drag my ellipse. I'm going to hold shift while I do that because that'll constrain it to an exact circle. Okay. And it came out default with my gradient there, and that's fine. Okay, but I don't want a linear type of gradient on this because that'll make it look like it's two-dimensional and flat. What I want to do is use the radial gradient. Woo! So that's different. All right. The radial gradient works the same way as the standard gradient in that if I select the gradient tool, I can change its sort of point of origin here. And this one is different in this respect. I can change the aspects of the actual gradient here. So if I wanted, for instance, if I wanted to create a circular shadow here, what I could do is stop it. Grab the edges here. Grab that here. So then I have something that begins looking like a circular shadow on the ground. It's a nice feature of that particular tool. Okay, so here we have our marble shape, or a basketball, or whatever that is, and I can change the aspects about it. It seems to go really dark really fast, so maybe what I want to do is I want to create some intermediate values in here. So all I do is can click beneath that right there, and I can change that anywhere I want. And I can move that backward or forward if I feel like it just isn't feeling realistic. Okay. I use my tool here. I can make it look like that the light is coming from the left. Take that out, make it feel a little bit more realistic. And of course, this needs a shadow under it. So I'm going to go ahead and create another ellipse. It's going to be casting a shadow off off to the right. Okay. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's on radial gradient. Okay. Now, unfortunately, I have white as my center point. I'm going to reverse those. I'm going to reverse white and black. Scrunch that down. And I think I can bring this out. Where the shadow is just really stark. And I'm not sure why that is. It's feeling a little weird to me. Like it's not behaving itself. All right. Now if I want to send this to back, it's Shift, Option, and then left bracket. Something like that. All right. This is basically your assignment done. Right, if you want to use colors on here, you absolutely could. Let's just double check. Yeah, so this is basically it. Play with your light source and your shadows. You're welcome to do things that are not like this, so long as the effect is you make it look fairly realistic, right, with your lights and shadows. All right, so then you can save that and turn it in. Okay, any questions? Did I lose everybody? I lost Travis. Okay, I didn't lose Amy. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close out the video.